Okay, good evening and welcome everyone to the Environment and Planning Committee meeting of Monday the 10th of October 2022. I'd like to declare the meeting open at 7 p.m. Acknowledgement of country. I'd like to firstly acknowledge the Bidjigal people of the Eora Nation and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders peoples who may be listening to this meeting or in attendance. Apologies, I think we have a full complement of councillors tonight, so we won't need that. Notice of live streaming of the committee meeting. The staff and public are reminded that this meeting is being recorded for minute-taking purposes and is also being webcast live on Council's website. This recording will be made available on Council's website as well. Okay, a code of meeting practice. The order of business is as shown in the agenda, which has been made available. Staff and public are reminded that this meeting is open. Doors to the meeting room are to be left open unless this meeting moves into a closed or confidential session according to section 15 of the code of meeting practice. Council's code of meeting practice prohibits the electronic recording of meetings without the express permission of council. Mobile phones must be turned to silent during the meeting. Disclosures of interest. Do any councillors have any interests to declare tonight? No? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to public participation on items on the agenda. We have one speaker registered for tonight's meeting, and I would remind our speaker that our speakers have a 3-minute time limit. The first sound you hear indicates that you have 30 seconds remaining. At the second sound, please conclude your comments. Our speaker tonight is speaking, I think they're online. Is that correct? Yes. On ENB 031-22, report on submissions, planning proposal PP 2022/0001, 9 Gloucester Road, Hurstville. And our speaker is Mr. Aaron Sutherland. Mr. Sutherland, are you online?
Yes, good evening, Madam Chair. Can you hear me?
Thank you. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and councillors. Look, I'm essentially here to answer any questions that the councillors may have of us in relation to this planning proposal. The planning proposal is a relatively straightforward matter, which is seeking to correct an anomaly that's occurred as a result of the new LEP coming into effect last year. So this planning, or the previous planning proposal on the site, was a result of quite an extensive process over many years with council, which resulted in a gazette of new controls earlier last year. The built form on the site anticipates residential flat building along the Gloucester Road frontage, and in fact moves all the commercial floor space up towards the Hurstville Road frontage. But subsequent to the gazette of the controls, the new Hurstville LEP came into effect, which resulted in a prohibition of residential flat development within the same B4 mixed-use zone that previously applied to the site. The consequence of that is that under the current controls, a residential flat building is not permissible at the upper end of the Gloucester Road frontage, as was intended through the extensive master planning process and the DCP controls that apply to the site. And the PP is essentially to rectify that issue. It's just important to note that the PP this particular PP does not diminish the commercial floor space on the site. So there's a minimum requirement of 0.5 to 1 FSR commercial floor space. The PP does not affect that. That is still to be delivered on the site. But instead, as I mentioned, that floor space is relocated to a more optimal location on the site to ensure the commercial success of that floor space and ensure the site can deliver on its economic contribution to Hurstville and jobs provision. I believe that addresses the core thrust of some of the objectives concerns, which are around concern around loss of employment floor space. And as I've just explained, that's not the case with this planning proposal. So look, we commend the officer's report to you, and we thank the staff for their assistance with this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sutherland. Okay, thank you, councillors. We'll move on to our next item, and that is confirmation of the minutes of the previous meeting being held on 12th of September 2022. So I'd like to call for a motion for that one, please. Moved by Councillor Borg and seconded by Councillor Jamieson, thank you. And we need to put that to a vote. I'm not sure who's doing the vote tally tonight. Is it you, Ms McKinley? If we could go around the room, thank you.
Madam Chair, your vote? You can for the minutes, yeah.
We'll just do that, just in the interest of time. We'll just put it to the meeting. All those in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone against? Okay, we'll declare that carried. Moving on to our next item, which is the committee report, and that's ENB 030-22, adoption of the Georges River Keeping of Animals Policy 2022. And before I go to Mr. Spooner to speak to it, I'm just going to call for a mover of this particular item.
I'm happy to move it.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Borg. Is somebody willing to second that? Seconded by Councillor Ambi Haberha, and welcome to your first Environment and Planning Committee. Mr. Spooner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just provide a brief background to this report and the reasons why the report's been presented to Council in its current form. The Local Government Act gives Council authorised officer the ability to issue orders under the Act in relation to the keeping of animals. The criteria by which those orders can be issued relates to the number, the type, or the conditions by which animals are kept on a particular property. The regulation that supports the Act has a list of criteria that certain animals must be kept under where there is a complaint that's been lodged and verified by an authorised officer. Those lists of animals are really restrictive. They are very historic. They relate very much to stock animals and poultry, which really aren't in keeping with the types of pet animals that people would keep in a modern day urban environment like Georges River. Prior to amalgamations, the two former councils both had policies in relation to the keeping of animals. In 2020, because we had to amalgamate our policies, we amalgamated the policies and put them out on exhibition. At that time, we received 131 submissions on that, and that was primarily because there was a misunderstanding, and probably the policy wasn't as clear in relation to that misunderstanding, that the policy wasn't a blanket order on the number of animals you could keep, but more so it was a guide to assist council staff where they had complaints about amenity issues arising from the keeping of animals as to what criteria may be applied to an order that may rectify any amenity complaints that were received. As a result of that submissions, at the time, the council decided to remove the requirements on the number of cats that could be kept on a property. Since that 2020 policy was adopted, we've had one particular significant matter where a particular resident has kept in excess of 20 cats. Unfortunately, that particular resident moved within the LGA twice, which thwarted our attempts to bring a resolution, a speedy resolution to the problem. And that resident has since now left the LGA, which is a wonderful thing for those who were living next door. But nonetheless, we did receive a number of submissions in relation to the current policy when it was on exhibition. A number of them was in support. A number of them added suggestions or amendments as part of that support. Others offered suggestions on what we could do which were beyond the scope of this particular policy, and that related to a mandate on containment of cats. And also on mandatory dissecting for all pets, which is beyond the scope of this report because, like I said, the policy is designed to be specific to a particular complaint. So we couldn't do a mandate for those things. One submission required the policy to actually do that, to be a broad apply to every particular property in the LGA, and others had concerns about the provision of controls specifically in relation to cats. As a result of the submissions, there was one very good submission that talked about council's regulatory role and our ability to provide requirements that were in excess of what the Act requires, and we agreed with that, and that related to the dissecting of cats, and that clearly was beyond the scope because it was not in keeping with the number, the type, or the conditions by which those animals are kept. So in response to that submission, it's proposed that we remove the requirement in 4.4.2, I think, to delete that requirement to sex cats where there's a problem. And we've also put that submission also made some suggestions in relation to council's role in relation to animal amenity, which really isn't our role. It's a matter for the RSPCA and other animal welfare issues for the RSPCA and other regulatory authorities associated with animal welfare issues. So the policy that's put to council to adopt is slightly amended from that which was exhibited, in the fact that we have deleted the requirement for cats to be desexed and clarified those issues in relation to council and the RSPCA's role about animal welfare issues. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Spooner. Councillors, do we have any questions? Councillor Jamieson?
Sorry, I do, through you, Madam Chair. Just that email that we got, I was just a bit confused. That talked about, is that what you're talking about, mandatory cat containment proposal, that it was off scope? Or do you know which email?
I think we've received a couple. Was this submission number 12? Does that relate to submission number 12? Because I know that there was a submission that came in, and there's been a number of emails that have come in about cat containment in response to some work that Hornsby Council's doing. I'm not sure that one.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a little bit different to what we're talking about here, and I believe that's will be a nom for the local government conference coming up. That relates to a decision made by Hornsby Council that they want to bring in a curfew for cats, and they will also want to make a provision whereby any feral animal they capture can be euthanised on site, or not on site, but rather quickly, without having to go through the provisions of the Companion Animals Act that relates to holding of those animals for prescribed periods and contacting animal welfare agencies to try and find a home for those. So that one is different to what we're trying to do here. This is in relation to complaints we receive about an individual property where there's been an amenity impact. That's a broader issue which is outside this particular policy.
Councillor Marnie?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. There was also an email from a resident who had a ongoing problem with animals next door, I think, and this resident's concerned about the policy changing from to be applied to that may apply to different situations. So would Mr. Spooner please comment on that? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Councillor. The policy was intentionally changed when it went on exhibition to say that the following criteria may apply, because the policy provides a suite of options for the authorised officer to make a determination on what's the best options to solve a particular problem. So if we were to say that all of those criteria were to apply, we would have to apply them to every individual case where it may not be necessary to apply those particular controls. So if the issue was about cleanliness of the property, or it was about odour, we could apply controls in relation to that, which would not necessarily relate to numbers of animals being kept, because if we're really just addressing the individual issues, not all issues that may apply, which would be specific to that particular property.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just ask a follow-up question based on that, Mr. Spooner? So therefore, the change in the wording doesn't actually dilute it, it just gives council officers more discretion to apply it to each individual scenario rather than just one size fits all.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. That's correct. Yeah, it does provide discretion, and it relates particularly to a particular circumstance. So on the merits of each particular case, that criteria could be applied. So it doesn't diminish the policy in any way whatsoever.
Great, thank you. Councillors, any more questions on this? Can I please call for a mover?
We had a mover in a second.
Oh, we've already done that.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, we have. Sorry, of course we have. Okay, ignore me. Okay, thank you. If there's no more questions, we will move to recording the vote. So, Mr. Kinley, if you wouldn't mind going around the room with that.
Madam Chair, your vote, please.
4, thank you.
Councillor Amber Haperhal.
4.
Councillor Borg.
4.
Councillor Jamieson.
4.
Councillor Marnie.
4.
Councillor Wang. 4. 6 votes for, unanimous.
Thank you. So we declare that one carried. We'll move on to our next item on the agenda, which is ENB 031-22, report on submissions for planning proposal PP 2022/0001 for 9 Gloucester Road, Hurstville. And before we do go to Ms. McMahon on that, I might call for a mover for that one, please. Okay, thank you, Councillor Borg. Moved by Councillor Borg, seconded by Councillor Wang. Thank you. Ms McMahon.
Through you, Madam Chair. This report is to advise the outcome of the public exhibition of the planning proposal relating to 9 Gloucester Road at Hurstville. Just to remind councillors, this planning proposal is to correct an issue that has arisen between the gazettal of the Georges River Local Environmental Plan last year and a planning proposal that relates back to 2015 that was only gazetted last year. What the Georges River LEP did was prohibit residential flat buildings along Gloucester Road, which the original planning proposal proposed and was supported by council at that time. The officers also supported a residential interface along that western part of Gloucester Road rather than a residential mixed-use interface. It came before council back in June this year. Council resolved to endorse it for exhibition. It was exhibited earlier this year from August to September, and council received 6 submissions, 4 which objected to the planning proposal and 2 which supported the planning proposal. The issues raised in the submissions related to the loss of employment space, additional residential development in Hurstville, inconsistency with the council's current LEP, developers' profit, a desire for social housing, the proposed open space and the impact on the trees. In relation to those issues, the original planning proposal was lodged in 2015 and was gazetted last year. There is no change to the FSR nor height, nor the non-residential floor space that is proposed by that original planning proposal and was gazetted last year. The only change is to allow what that original planning proposal sought, which is to have residential flat buildings fronting Gloucester Road and not a mixed-use development. The preference for social housing is noted, and with respect to that, the council at its last meeting resolved to investigate a affordable housing contribution scheme for the whole LGA, and there is a report coming up to the Environment and Planning Committee in November regarding that. We just don't have the mechanism to accept affordable housing at this stage, nor does this planning proposal relate in any way to a built form outcome. It's only relating to the use of the ground floor of those residential flat buildings that would front Gloucester Road. There is a current part of the Georges River DCP, Development Control Plan, that applies to this site, and that has site-specific controls. And there are controls regarding tree retention or existing street trees on Gloucester Road, as well as significant clusters of mature trees on Forest Road have to be retained. And we've also required another additional row of street trees on Gloucester Road to support that tree canopy. In terms of solar access and location of the communal open space, that original 2015 planning proposal complies with the current standards in the Apartment Design Guide. And therefore, there are no changes recommended to the planning proposal that's currently before council as a result of those submissions. I just want to highlight to councillors that the original planning proposal was supported by a voluntary planning agreement, which required the proponent to pay a monetary contribution of $3.6 million. That has been paid to council, and some of that money has been used in the youth centre at Penshurst Park. So the planning proposal before council does meet the strategic and site merit tests that are outlined in the New South Wales Government's LEP plan making guideline. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms McMahon. Councillors, do we have any questions for Ms McMahon or any comments on this? No? Okay. Oh, Councillor Money?
Just a comment, Madam Chair. I'd like to acknowledge the staff who, and maybe also the applicant, for a great outcome with the trees being kept there, because it's very green area of Hurstville, as we all know, and it's a good outcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Money. Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you. Well, we will put this to a vote, and I'll ask Ms McKinley to go around the room. I just want to put up front on the record that whenever this item has come before council, I've either voted against it or abstained, and in the interest of consistency, I'm going to do that again tonight. I'm not seeking to influence anybody else's vote, because I do recognise that some good things have come out of it through the BPA and what Councillor Money just highlighted, but just in the interest of consistency, that's my position on this.
Madam Chair, your vote, please.
Abstain.
Councillor Amby Haperhart.
For.
Councillor Borg.
For.
Councillor Jamieson.
Abstain.
Councillor Marnie.
For.
Councillor Wang. For. All votes for, 2 abstain.
Thank you, Ms McKinley. We'll declare that one carried, and that's our final item on the agenda for tonight. So thank you everybody for attending, and for those who are listening online, we'll close the meeting at 7:21 and bid you good night.